Hello and welcome to the very first Retro Rugby show. What we're going to do in these shows is we're going to go back in time, have a look at a game that is special to my guests, and we'll talk through the game, what happened, and relive some wonderful memories as well. Sometimes good and sometimes bad, in all honesty. Let's be honest, not all wonderful memories are good, but so that's what we're going to do. And joining me to do it, I have John O'Connor and Mikey Scott. How are you doing, guys?
Hey, cheers, guys. Thanks for having us on, Paul.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
So this game that we're going to go through takes us all the way back to 2011. Let's be honest, that year kicked off with everybody looking towards the Rugby World Cup. But we then had an absolute tragedy down in Christchurch with the earthquakes down there, obviously destroying the city, causing deaths, and basically they're still rebuilding now, back in 2020, so 9 years on. At the time, that obviously meant that the Crusaders couldn't play their games down in Christchurch, so they took their games on the road. And one of those games they took on the road, they came all the way up to Twickenham in London to what is commonly known, or what is as HQ to English rugby fans. And this game was between the Crusaders and the Sharks. Now, John, is this game special just because you're a Sharks fan, or why does this game particularly hang in the memory?
Look, I'm just shaking my head because this English fan here talks about HQ. I mean, I can understand Lord, being 250 odd years old. So the Mink and Mink said, "This is the HQ of rugby." I think why it's so special is multifaceted. I think the most important part of it all is what Christchurch was going through, and for the listeners who don't know the history of New Zealand and what was happening in New Zealand at that time, is that Christchurch was not seen as, excuse the pun, epicenter of earthquake activity. That was seen as Wellington, which experiences multiple earthquakes during the year, little ones quite often. And so there was a first quake in the September of 2010, and then there was this terrible earthquake in 2011 in February that devastated the city. And not only did it kill people and buildings collapsed, not only was the situation where so many people were homeless, and as you mentioned, still rebuilding 9 years later, but the stadium, the Christchurch Stadium, which was formerly Jade and then renamed whatever, was so badly damaged that in the end it was torn down, but it wasn't safe. So suddenly you had the Crusaders on the road. So that's the number one thing, is this match was moved to Twickenham as a fundraiser. And there was such a sense of fraternity in the rugby community, in that the English Rugby Union made the venue available. The Sharks agreed, they didn't have to play the game, they agreed to travel from Durban to the UK to play this game with the Crusaders.
Well, let's just stop for a second here, because the travel is going to be a big thing for this game, as far as play goes. So yes, the Crusaders the weekend before were playing, I think it was the Highlanders in New Zealand, and then flew up. But for this was the fourth match on tour for the Sharks. So they'd already played twice in Australia, once in New Zealand, and so they were also travelling from New Zealand. Yeah. They flew from New Zealand back to Durban and then up to Twickenham. So, both these teams arrived pretty knackered, let's be honest. And considering that the display they put on was something phenomenal.
It was and that's the thing that has made all these years later, made the game stick in my mind, was the quality of the game. And maybe there was something in the air in that, with what had happened in Christchurch, a lot of things, and we're experiencing this now with COVID-19 striking the world so dramatically, is it puts things in perspective. What is really important? What is really dangerous, right? And maybe there was this air of I don't. Maybe it's fearlessness. Maybe it's courage. Maybe it's realization that this is a game to be played and enjoyed, right? But that's how they played. And then there was the Bill Williams
just too
factor.
quick on that as well. Also, this is the only Super Rugby game to have ever been held in Europe. I'm not going to say Northern Hemisphere because Japan's in the Northern Hemisphere. I think it was also an element here of, I suppose, Super Rugby back then especially used to get basically have this image, or the Northern view of it was, or the European view of it was, that basically it was basketball rugby, and that there wasn't really much defence and tackling involved. It was just throw the ball around. I think there was also an element of, right, we are this is the first ever game, and it's never happened since in Europe. We're going to put on a show to show these Europeans what Super Rugby really is. I think there's also an element of that was there as well, as to kind of, we want to show what our product is.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I've been very disappointed over the years, because at the time I thought this will jolt European rugby, to realize that rugby can be played like this in the right conditions, at the right, and we've spoken about moving the European season or something to better conditions, but rugby can be played like this and experienced like this as a sport. If you're a spectator, you could watch this kind of rugby. But I do think one thing to stand out, and I really want to hand over to Mikey here, is that Sonny Bill Williams had come back to rugby. When I say back, let's be fair. There's 2 stints when he's come to rugby from rugby league, but this was the first time. He was young. He had spent some seasons at Toulon, right? At Toulon, under the tutelage of Tana Umanga. I think Tana's played with him in the sort of last season of his career as a player, and then coached him. And he came now into Super Rugby wanting to qualify to play the 2011 World Cup, which he did from the bench. And he was playing next to Dan Carter.
Well, hang on, let's just remind ourselves. At Toulon, he was playing between Johnny Wilkinson and Tana Umanga. Then he went down south and played next to Dan Carter. Yeah, he had kind of an easy ride of it in some ways.
Yes, he had a perfect introduction, right? But what happened at this game is, I believe in the last 30 years, the 2 most impactful players on the game of rugby have been John Olomu and Sonny Bill Williams. And he's a polarizing figure here in New Zealand, is Sonny Bill. But I know, having been in South Africa in that time, that he forever changed rugby. And I realized this when I saw a tight head prop from a very conservative Afrikaner school. When I say conservative, let's be fair, conservative rugby brand Afrikaner school, make an offload in the tackle, a tight head prop. This was probably 5 years after this 2011 game, and I realized Sonny Bill had changed the game forever. That would never have happened before Sonny Bill. And so in this game, you see all that he had, just the wares were laid out for everyone to marvel at. And I think similar to that game where Jonah ran over the English, sorry, Paul, in Cape Town.
I've got a funny feeling that'll be another retro rugby show.
Yeah. It's similar to that game in 95 when in Cape Town in the semi-final of the World Cup, where the whole world was jolted. This game here is where the whole world went, whoa. That we've never seen anything like that before.
So, Mikey, welcome to the channel, and you've just learned that if you let John go, you're not going to get to say another word for the next 5 minutes. So
I'm quite happy listening to John. He's as always. I think I've said it to you before. He's a brilliant analyst and student of the game. So
don't say it in front of him. Jeez, please.
I like this man. Man is a keeper.
So what else can I add to that? I'm not entirely sure I can add anything to what you've just said. It's everything everything I've been thinking about this game and the importance of it to New Zealand. And just part of my background, I coached 60 miles or 100K south of Christchurch in 2627 at a place called Ashburton. Pretty exciting town. But and I went back for the 2011 World Cup, and so I was in constant communication with my friends after the quake, and it was heartbreaking to go into Christchurch, land there, and see what had happened. It wasn't a city any longer. It was just a bunch of buildings being destroyed. So that season, the 2011 season for the Crusaders, was really, I don't know, just solidified my remembrances of my friends in New Zealand and seeing what the game was all about. The fraternity, the brotherhood, the coming together as one to help out. And they had a pretty exciting brand of rugby too at that point. They still do. But, it was great to watch it, and there's so many things I take from that Crusaders team, and I still use them in my coaching practices, all the time.
I was going to say that's why I dragged on to this particular game, because you mentioned in our Facebook chat that there was one try, and we'll get onto it later, but there's one try in this game that you still coach your team to do, because and that's this is where you got that from. So I thought also that was a kind of poignant moment for me from this game.
Mikey, as somebody who is in Canada, and when you saw this game, on top of all the emotion and the ties that you have with that area and what they'd been through, what did you think when you watched this brand of rugby unfold before your eyes?
Oh, it was amazing, and it was even more shocking that it was being held in Twickenham, as Paul says, HQ, Rugby HQ. I went, wow, God, how many English people are going to start tuning into Super Rugby now? Because that was a bloody exciting game. Just full of skills and offloads and the emergence, as you said earlier, of Sonny Bill. It changed the game. It was about a year later that we actually started coaching offloads, because so many people were saying, how do we do this? How do we do this? And as coaches, we're going, okay, we're going to have to try and figure this out somehow, because the guy revolutionized, as you said, the modern game. One player. And I see, as you said, you've seen props doing it. I see second rows doing it now. Props, everyone's doing the offload. Yeah, it's so part of the game now. I couldn't even conceive a game now any longer where there wasn't this going on.
So we mentioned that it was raising money. It's raising money for Red Cross, Christchurch Peel, and 35,000 people made their way to Twickenham for this game. We had obviously the minute silence, and something you just don't see in rugby, well, in sport pretty much outside of of North America. We had the anthems as well before this game, so both sides lining up. There'll be a bunch of players there who have never played and probably never will again play a rugby game with their national anthem played before it.
I didn't think of that. That's very, very true, Paul.
There are lots of poignant moments in this one. Take you back. I was hoping we would have some sort of retro comms, but no. Stuart Barnes and Justin Marshall were on the microphones, so pretty much what we have nowadays hasn't changed. The referee, though, the referee with the best hair in the game, who was it?
It certainly wasn't Andre Watts, because he didn't have much hair.
Oh, I'm amazed. Steve Walsh.
Ah, okay. Yes.
The man who would look up at the big screen and do his hair. mid-game.
Yes. Yes.
Referee's equivalent of Percy Montgomery.
And to be fair, he had an okay game in this one, but you can definitely tell times have changed with some of the lack of cards, especially in this one. Straight from the off, the try we'll get onto is a big break, but only 2 minutes in, we've got the Crusaders off first phase, Sorry, I've not run through the teams. Let me just run through the teams. You mentioned some of the players, but the Crusaders lineup was Wyatt Crockett, Corey Flynn, Owen Franks, Brad Thorne, obviously at the Reds now, Sam Whitelock, who's still around, George Whitelock, Matt Todd, and Kieran Reid. Andy Ellis and Dan Carter were running the show, with Sonny Bill Williams and Robbie Fruin. Oh, that was a big midfield. And a back three of Zach Guilford, Sean Maitland, obviously who's now with Scotland, and Israel Dagg.
By the way, can I just point out something here? There's a couple of names that are quite important to what's happened there. First of all, I think Corey Flynn played 5 or less tests for the All Blacks, and is a vastly underrated hooker. He really is. So he's a real heartbeat of that Crusaders era, where they made so many playoff rounds but didn't crack the final prize. This was all under Blackadder, right, as coach?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. So Corey Flynn is a key part of that. The other key part of that is Matt Todd. They had a real out-and-out 7 while he was still young, sort of, and really at the height of his speed. So remembering, and we've said this before on the channel, the purpose of a 7 is not what we tend to see highlighted by commentators during the game, which is either winning turnovers, the most flashy thing, or slowing the ball down. But the primary goal, and we've got a coach right here with us, the primary purpose of a 7 is to secure your own ball.
But
is to make sure
the other thing we'll
that
see
your
him do
ball is
in
not
this game,
turned over or slowed down.
The other thing we'll see in this game is that he'll play the link man as well.
Yeah.
In this
So
game.
So he was helping. Of course, nobody can attend every ruck or even every second ruck, but his presence to clear away the slowing down hands is really important. And Robbie Fruin, talk about I don't want to say a tragedy, but talk about a loss to rugby, because this was before he was diagnosed with his heart condition, and his true potential was never realized as a rugby player. He had operations and he tried to come back, but he was never the same player that you see in this period now.
And also, if it wasn't for Nonu and Conrad Smith, he would have been a multiple All Black as well.
Yes.
At this time.
Yeah. Pretty tough competition at that level. An embarrassment of riches in New Zealand.
Yeah. Now you got to remember this is
Corey Flynn was up against. I can see their faces in front of me. Kevin Mialamu.
Yep.
And in that era, as well as the farmer from down south.
Think Carl. Are we?
No, not Carl. At hooker.
Anyway, I'll let the name come to you.
Okay.
On the bench, Quinton MacDonald, Ben Franks, just the one prop. It's a 22-man squad, not a 23-man squad. Chris Jack on the bench. Seriously. John Poff, Khan Futalihi, the Samoan international who went on to play for Ospreys and Saints in the UK. Matthew Berquist and Adam Whitelock on the wing. A Whitelock who's a winger. I'm not sure if that's allowed, but anyway. So that was the Crusaders lineup. On the Sharks side, and John is going to kill me now for pronunciations, but John Smith, obviously legend, Bismarck and Johnny DePleece in that front row.
Sorry,
Bismarck and Johnny DePleece. Anyway,
Yanni Duplessis.
Yanni Duplessis. There we go. We then had Steve Sykes and Alistair Hargreaves in the locking positions, with Keegan Daniel, William Alberts, and Ryan Kankowski are your loose trio.
Yes.
Remember that.
Who was playing hooker? It was John Smith, right?
No, John Smith was playing prop.
Was playing prop.
Bismarck
Okay.
was a hooker.
Okay.
You then had Carl McLeod and Jacques Luce Potiga at number 10 because Lambie was injured for this game. The Bosman, or Maya Bosman and Stefan Tablanche were the centre combination, with Lizani Mavovo and Obawa and Gandhi were the wingers, and Lewis Ludick as fullback. Look, just okay, pronounce it for me, please.
We're rolling with it.
Loazi Mvovo.
And
it's Odwa, right?
Otway, yeah.
Yeah, Odwa, because he had a twin brother, Akona. So then they look just the same. They both got dreadlocks. So it's Odwa Ndungani. And who was fullback?
Sorry?
Who was fullback?
Lewis Ludick.
Lewis who?
Ludik, Ludick.
Oh, Lewis Ludick. Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Broke up. It wasn't your terrible pronunciation
On that occasion.
of God's names.
Off the bench, we had Eugene van der Staden, the Beast. So they had two props on the bench because Smith could move to hooker.
Yes.
Which gave them an advantage. Gerhard Mostert, Jacques Boats, Conrad Hoffman, Adrian Jacobs, and J.P. Peterson on the bench.
On the bench? My goodness. He must have been coming back from injury. They were probably easing him back in from injury or something like that. Is the only way I can think of it. But you can see that there is a difference, especially in the back line. There's a difference in talent level between what the Crusaders could put on the field and the Sharks.
Yeah, and having players like Chris Jacks, Ben Franks, who was an All Black at the time, on the bench as well, showed the depth that the Crusaders could bring off the bench was definitely higher than the Stormers. Sorry, the Sharks. Which is when we get down to this game and the score, you're going to say, "Oh, wow, the Crusaders won that easily." But if the difference actually in the end is pretty much kicks, and unfortunately Pottinger just did not bring his kicking boots to this game, and he only made one conversion, which really was a big bit of it. But as I say, early on, we within the first 6 minutes, you can see how the Crusaders are going to play. First phase ball off scrum, spun out wide, Zach Guilford making breaks. Sonny Bill Williams going through the middle with Fruin then just off his shoulder, and within the first few minutes they could have scored a couple of tries, but instead scramble defence or just running out of space on the park meant that they only got a penalty in the first 6 minutes. The Sharks could have got themselves a penalty and could have come straight back into it after having had no ball in that first 9 minutes. But Pottinger, as I said, just didn't have his kicking boots on that day and couldn't hit the side of a barn. He not only missed penalties, but he also missed, he only made 1 out of 4 conversions in this game. From a coaching point of view, you'll enjoy this one. 22 dropout from Dan Carter. He stands all the way on the left, kicks it across pitch to all the way on the right, just 2 meters out. So the ball is hanging in the air for a long, long time. And you saw there were definitely things that they were trying and doing in this game that you don't see very often. Because 22 dropouts, generally you take it from the middle, making the opposition think which side it's going to go. But no, it's like it's going to drop there, but all my players are going to be underneath it, so good luck. And they did that. The first try actually goes to Alberts, who bashed over, and the Sharks take a 3-7 lead. And the Sharks could retain ball here. Their problem in this game, in that first half, really, was just getting over that gain line. And when he bashed over, he beat 3 players. When they did a bit of picking going, Sharks got some go forward. But the Sharks do what they're doing in this game, make too many errors, give a penalty straight on the restart, and it's 6-7. So for that first 50 minutes, this is a very, very close. It's a 1-point game. It doesn't blow out. It's not shown the signs of blowing out in the way that it did. I don't know if you guys, what your guys' memories were of those opening quarter.
Go for it, mate.
Sorry, yeah. It's, my recollections go on this game. It was the first just a couple of prize fighters just punching it out and trying to souse out each other's weaknesses and strengths. And based on what I'd seen the Crusaders playing earlier on in the season or prior to that, I thought it was going to be a lot more for the Crusaders, so I was happy the Sharks were making a really good game of it at that point. That was a pretty stacked team that the Crusaders had at that for that match.
What we then had, though, is what we've seen the Crusaders do so many times, is when they get the upper hand, they'll score bang, 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 bang. So we had that 13-minute penalty on 30 minutes, 60 minutes, Maitland scores. There's an inside ball to Zach Guilford, who has Todd on his shoulder, who just offloads the ball who passes the ball on to Maitland, who then goes and scores. You could hear Stuart Barnes in the commentary box going, "Whew!" And you're like, "Oh, he's just he's just made a mess." He just the ecstasy. He's just not used to watching this kind of rugby, and he's just like, "Wow, that was amazing." In there, and then the Sharks scrum got absolutely monstered by the Crusaders. It goes backwards. The scrum half is fumbling the ball. The ball comes out to Sonny Williams. He does a step, offloads to Carter, and Carter's under the posts. And suddenly we've gone from it being sort of 3-7 to being 27 in the space of just 9 minutes, and the game is not quite gone, but suddenly there's a bit of breathing space for the Crusaders, and that's been a hallmark of their play and the All Blacks' play really for the past decade, hasn't it?
Yeah, the All Blacks that you're almost reading from a script where you think you're in the game, in the last, let's say, 15 years, maybe a bit less in international rugby against the All Blacks. You think you're in the game, and suddenly you go, "How did that just happen?"
Yeah, it just happens so fast. It usually only takes a few minutes before suddenly you're exactly. How did that happen?
It's a ruthlessness when the opportunity presents itself.
I've got a comment in here saying that we complain now about how long kickers take and how long these sort of things take, but boy, did the kickers take an age in this game. Thank God they brought in that 60-second rule, because boy, you can go and make a coffee while they're lining up a penalty kick.
Remember those days? I remember remember the sand, and Andre Pretorius. I think what he used to do is put the sand down, put the ball on. This is even after the kicking tee. He still used sand, and then he would take sand, and then he would draw put a trail of sand towards the poles, and
you guys can remember when you had to dig your foot into the ground to stick the ball into a divot.
That's right. I remember that. Dig. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly the ground in our city, it's all clay. It's almost impossible.
Then we come to the try that Mikey was talking about. The Crusaders have a scrum, had another knock on by the Sharks. The Andy Ellis takes the ball, passes it to Kato, passes it to Sonny Bill, who puts it out the back to Andy Ellis, who's running the loop, straightens up, gives it to Robbie Fruin, who straightens up as well, has Dag off his shoulder, gives it to Dag, and Dag's basically in the corner, untouched.
Right.
Yeah, Mikey, that's the kind of move that you now train and coach still today.
Yeah.
Just
I'm not a huge believer in multiple, 15 or 20 different strike moves, certainly club level. But this one just creates options all the way through. I mean, it's at some point there's 7 different passing options or running options, which is what you want your guys to be looking at, playing what's in front of you. And that was such an eye-opener to me, that one try in particular. Mm-hmm. Especially when you break it down into what you can do with it. It's just astounding.
And
can I ask, what are the key elements of when you train that? What are the key things that you say to your guys?
All we're trying to do is create options. Based off of that, say, okay, so what are your options at this point? So you can stop, break it down, roll it back, move forward, walk it through, talk it through. It's based on what the defense is doing and what your lines are. I mean, those lines on that are just exceptional. That's, if you're looking at a strike play, I would say that's probably still highly effective to this day. Just by letting the players evaluate what's happening in front of them. Simple as that.
Mikey, would I be right in saying that a key to that is the fact that your midfield, whatever players you've got running in the center of that move must be running straight?
Absolutely. That's pretty much the game at this point, right? So you just got to make your defenders commit.
Yes.
Which means you have to be running straight. And you can have your options running out the back or slicing back inside for whatever. But you have to have that deception running straight ahead or as an option.
Yes. As a just for our viewers, one of the things that New Zealand does exceptionally well over the many, many decades is their midfielders run straight, right? And it's drilled into youngsters from early, is that if the ball's coming from your left, right, you do not drift to the right if you're in the midfield. So unfortunately, if your staple diet of rugby is touch, and you're trying to avoid contact, you develop these bad habits of taking the ball, say, coming from the left, and then what happens is you start to drift left as you run.
Yeah.
But New Zealand, they are drilled that the ball is coming from the left, you hit the ball and you run straight, right? And you commit the defender. And that is why New Zealand has such a legacy of try-scoring wings. It's not only their talent, but it's the midfield that creates space for them. So the wingers are not being shifted always to the outside by their own players.
Yeah. So if you're looking, going on that point, so if you're looking at like the Crusaders attack, and a lot of other teams, I believe in New Zealand, have adopted as well, the 2-4-2, which you need. The only way those patterns can be run effectively is if you actually run straight. Otherwise, it's gone. It's over. You can't function properly. So that's that's the biggest thing that I like to work on is, especially when you set up a structure or pattern, you have to take that ball. You can't drift. You cannot drift at all on attack.
And for people watching, if you're coaching youngsters, what helps them to do that, if you say to them to give them a reference point, either a pole, right, or if they're not opposite one of the poles, if there's something, a fence post or a marker or a building or something, and say, you run at that, right? That is your line, and you stay on that line.
Yeah. Even as much as, you never want to see someone get completely lit up on the tackle. Someone running straight on a defender who's got a clear shot at you.
But the key is when you start running, though. Am I right, Mikey?
Yeah. In fact,
when you start moving before the ball even gets to you, that tendency is to start to do this. So when the ball starts coming out of the ruck over there, so sorry, I'm pointing. I'm quite small here. So you're looking at the ball is coming from over there, right? And the tendency is then to start doing this as that ball is coming. So you're sort of anticipating, and your head is going like this. But to say from the very beginning, and the ball is 2 passes away from you, you're starting to run, and you've lined yourself up, and you start.
Yeah. In fact, I'd probably say in that regards, and I've done it as well. It's like you start running towards the ball, and that gives you an option to make that swerve outwards.
That's right.
When that defender isn't tracking you properly.
So we had that wonderful try that lives in the memory now. We followed that up then with the Sharks knock on the ball. The ball goes to Dan Carter. He steps, offloads to Dag, pass it to Ellis, pass it to Guildford. And the thing we remember about Zach Guildford is his drinking and his off-field issues. But actually watching him play, his pace, he was rapid.
He was fast, and it's sad that he succumbed to his problems. I think reading about him lately, though, he's come back from that. He's recovering from his issues. Have I not read that? I don't keep up with the old All Blacks as much, but
it just happens he's currently playing club rugby in Hamilton, where I'm walking around club rugby games. So no comment.
Okay. Oh, that's too bad. He was a talent for sure.
Yep.
And on that, you look at that back three. You've got Maitland, who goes off to play for Scotland because, and he is a bright spark for Scotland, and has been for almost 10 years, I guess, or 7 or 8. You've got Israel Dag, you got Zach. I mean, those guys, that's a international back three.
Yeah, well,
sure.
And you've got Dag and Zach Guildford, who played club rugby together. So these guys know each other inside out. They know so the fact that you find Dag giving balls to Zach Guildford to score tries is no coincidence. It's because those guys have played since teenagers together all the way through, and Zach Guildford just knows where to be to get that ball, and Dag knows he's going to be there. So.
And that Dag in 2011, that's the Israel Dag where people were making comparisons with Christian Cullen. It was prior to Dag having his really bad thigh injury, where the quadricep was torn really badly, and he never was quite the same electric explosion after that. But that was right at the start of his international career, and of course he went to the 2011 World Cup as the second choice fullback, and then when Muliaina got injured, I think in the semi-final he played the final. But that was, and I remember watching in 2011 in Port Elizabeth the what was then Tri Nations test against the Springboks and watching from in the stands, and I was very blessed to be there at the Nelson Mandela Stadium, and watching from the stands and thinking, this guy is a potentially another Christian Cullen.
It's quite exceptional.
He was a wonderful player in his time, and even when you got to remember he got dropped for the 2015 Rugby World Cup, he came back and was top try scorer for the All Blacks in 2016, I think, from memory. He was on absolute fire playing on the wing. Yeah, a wonderful player there. And suddenly it's 34-10, and yeah, let's be honest, the game has pretty much gone at this point. But we then have a kickoff, and some teams, clearly the Crusaders clearly switched off a little bit here. They thought the game was gone. We have this restart, so the Sharks take it short, just over the 10-metre line. It gets battered back by one of their locks, and then Pottinger collects it and runs it in from pretty much the halfway line, with 15 Crusaders in front of him. None of them put a hand on him, and you're like, what? Pottinger is not well, he didn't show it in this game. He's not someone I kind of remembered before this, but he's not a Pat Lambie running with the ball by any stretch. So yeah, he's a serviceable Super Rugby fly half. He is not he's not a Quade Cooper or a flashy running fly half by any stretch. But yeah, he cut through the entire. Well, obviously you got players wide either side that can't get to him, but still cuts through the entire team and scores a try, and then he misses the conversion.
Well, I probably have to say that defensive structures have come a long way in the last 9 years.
But this is the kind of coach killer, right, Mikey? And you spoke about it earlier, Paul, where the Sharks they score a try, and then from the kickoff they give away a stupid penalty, and this is the kind of thing where you must want to pull your hair out, right? That lapse of concentration.
Yep.
Am I?
Yeah, it's and it could only be 5 guys, 2 laps of concentration, but it's still 1/3 of the field.
Yeah.
He just, as you said, a coach killer. So what happened? How did you all shut off one guy? You can see if phases building up, players being manipulated. But one guy coming through a whole Crusaders outfit. Jesus.
But this is also one of these situations where you're like, kind of like, he's not going to run all the way. I'm looking for the support runner, and I'm going to make sure I tackle the support runner. It's one of those players where you look at him and go, yeah, he's not the danger. The danger is that winger that's just about to hit his shoulder. So the guy drifts out to the winger, leaving him alone, and he then runs through and scores. So yeah, it's one of those ones that he can pull off occasionally, but it's not something he's going to do over and over again because hasn't got the footwork to do it regularly. But yeah, and then we saw some real game management by the Crusaders. The use it law wasn't in action at this point. So you just saw the Crusaders set up a ruck, and Andy Ellis just stand there for about 2 minutes, just looking around, going, "What am I going to do with this?" Absolutely, we are taking the pace totally out of this game. Okay, we've got ourselves a big lead. We're not about to make a couple of mistakes and give up 14 to 21 points. We're just going to stop the game. Great game management. Horrible for the viewers, to be honest. But you've literally got 2 sides just standing there in a line, looking at each other with the ball sat at the back of a ruck, going, "Okay, go, no, do something." We're not going to.
That's where the forwards made their they made their money that game. We'll just stand here and beat each other down in this infernal ruck, and we're not going to let the ball go out.
I mean, there was no one new joining the ruck. There was no one. I mean, the ruck was pretty much a stationary lump of bodies. It really was going. It really just the game stopped for a good minute. The Sharks did get a penalty because running up to half time at this point. you're 34-15 down. You've got a kicker who can't hit the side of a barn. So what do? You kick sticks. To be fair, he got this one over on 38 minutes, and that ended the half. But you kind of like, I'm sat there going, what are we? We're 19 points behind, coming into and you decide to kick sticks. I'm not sure what Smith was thinking at that point, but hey, interesting decision going into half time. So
yeah.
So let's just point out the moment here to everybody who's watching. We just covered the first half.
Yes.
When you said the Sharks win it, and then bang, 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 there wasn't like game management for the last 10 minutes of the game. It's the last 10 minutes of the half.
Yes, the first half. Yes.
Right. And the point that I'd like to raise here is that yes, the Sharks had that easy try, and they was, but by all intents and purposes, you would expect the Crusaders from this point to just motor into the distance, and that would be it, right? Especially with all the travel, the Sharks had been on the road. Now this was now their 5th week on the road away from home,
No,
and having
they were supposed. This was their last game in New Zealand. Yep.
Yeah. So this is their 4th game, right? So you would expect them to, 1 foot on the plane to kind of like, oh well, this is gone. This is, but that second half, my goodness.
And yeah, you're right. But it's like we're talking about game management there with 5 minutes to go in the first half, slowing things down. It's the Crusaders will do it when they need to, because the Crusaders are famous for scoring either side of half time. That's not what happened in this game.
Yes,
they actually lost concentration at the end of the first half. Come out the second half though, scrum penalty. Dan Carson knocks over 3 more, and it's 37-18. Surely that does kill the game off, but no.
Yeah. But no.
Hargreaves bashes over, where the Sharks decided now to use the full width and use their 2 quick wingers to get them up the pitch, so that Hargreaves, the lock, bash over for a try. Israel Dag follows it up with a moment of madness on his own 22, decides to take a quick line out. The ball and player get smashed. It gets turned over, and some great support lines being run down the right hand side for Ngambi to score.
Undungani,
thank you. To score.
There we go. You got it.
And suddenly, we're up to 4 tries each. We've had the 1 penalty from 2 penalties kicked by the Sharks, 3 penalties kicked by the Crusaders. So surely it's a 3-point game. No, it's 37-28 still, even though it's 4 tries each, which shows you the importance of having a kicker. Because the Sharks should have been in this.
Just writing that down, just like, okay, yeah, that's the kicking, big difference there.
Yep.
At least at this point, yeah.
And they even changed their kicker, and Bosman still misses. So I must apologise to Pottinger. He only got 1 out of 3 conversions. He didn't miss the 4th one. Bosman did.
Yes. And you know what's not often spoken about in rugby, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mikey, is that the point of a penalty is in the word. It's a penalty for doing something that you shouldn't have done, right?
Yep.
So it's a payment for being naughty. So stop doing that, right? Because that's going to cost you points. However, if it doesn't cost you points, it doesn't act as a deterrent.
Yeah. That's a very good point. A bit cynical, perhaps, but it's.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the yellow card for professional infringements, especially close to your own try line, that's why that was brought in, because the cynical view is, okay, we'll give you 3 points, right? It's better than a minimum 5, possible 7.
Yep.
And in fact, the now going back, say, sort of 20 odd years, 15 to 20 years, the South African players used to call the 5 meter the 5 meter area in front of the Wallabies and the Waratahs line. They used to call it the war zone, WAUGH, because full war would infringe in those 5 meters, right? So it was a nicker. That's the war zone. He will lie on the ball, slow it down, kill it, hands in the ruck, whatever. But if you're not kicking the penalties, then the Crusaders are going to continue, especially the Crusaders, are going to continually infringe to make sure you don't get quick ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about cards, there should have been a couple in this game. First off, we have Sykes pretty much taking off Sam Whitelock's head, but that's just a penalty. As he just stuck his arm out. In the old days, it would be a matter of, if you just stick your arm out, throw your arm out, you kind of, it's instinctive, you get away with it. Not nowadays. Yeah. That would have been a red card. Yeah. So Sykes was lucky to stay on. Sonny Bill Williams then showed his rugby league roots with one player having tackled the player. Sonny Bill Williams just tucks the shoulder, bang, to the chin, and knocks a player on the ground. The Sharks, perhaps in this case, were their own worst enemies because they took a quick tap and go off that penalty. If it had been if there'd been a bit of a TMO or there'd been a referee had time to think about it, you could have seen Sonny Bill go. But yes, there was there was no dropping, there was nothing. It was upwards on the chin, and the player was on the ground for several minutes afterwards, trying to recover. Concussion protocols were definitely not in play this day, as well.
Back then, were they ever though? Really?
No. Oh yeah. No, that's what I mean. So yeah, this is just reminding people as to how the game was different back then. Both sides would have had a red card in this game by today's rules. The Sharks are obviously chasing the game, which is why they did that tap and go. They had their opportunities in the second half to score more points, but they just didn't manage to. Some bad decision making with grubbers through meant that they didn't actually get any. They still had opportunities, but didn't get any. The Crusaders also had some end-to-end stuff, but we had Dag dropping the ball. We had other passes just going behind players.
Do you think by this stage you could have seen the travel starting to affect decision making and fine skills?
I think so. Yep. Plus, we also had here that the Sharks really were chasing the game, which meant it was broken play, which meant players look up and go, "Oh, there's an opportunity, let's go," which we know the Crusaders and we know the New Zealand teams do. If they see an opportunity, they say, "Right, let's go for it." But there were so many of them because it was broken field, because the game was being chased. That the players are out on their feet, really, but they're still just trying to do it. We had
I remember there were so many instances of, even though it didn't lead to a direct score, right? So it won't form part of, let's say, the points highlight package. There were so many instances of breathtakingly wonderful rugby that didn't result in a score, but just where you went, wow, again and again and again.
Yep. No, both. Yeah, there was both sides were, but just that final ball wasn't quite there, or the player would chase all the way back. I mean, there was one wonderful moment. Actually, it's at the end of the game, so that's why I've not got to it yet. Where George Whitelock picks up the ball in his own 5 meter line and runs all the way. Now this is the number 6. Remember, this is the lock. Runs all the way to the Sharks' 5 meter line before he gets
the
dragged
flank.
down. Sorry?
I mean the flank.
The flank.
You said 6, the lock. Yeah.
6. Okay. Sorry, 6 the flanker. Yeah, sorry. This isn't Adam the winger Whitelock. This is the flank Whitelock, who runs through his own 5-metre line and just gets dragged down on the Sharks' 5-metre line. Should he have passed it? Oh, yes. But hey, he had white line fever from a long way out.
Get the blinders on.
I'm going to score.
Okay, raise your hand if you've never done that yourself.
And at that stage, the Crusaders were playing with 14 men because Sam Whitelock was injured, and they'd used up all their replacements already. So for the past few minutes. But you've talked a lot about the offloading in this game and how that was basically being introduced to the Northern Hemisphere. The other skill that's being introduced in the Northern Hemisphere here was the no-look inside pass. Because Stuart Barnes had no idea what had happened when this.
Really?
Absolutely, he was trying to describe it, and he couldn't. And Justin Marshall had to come in and go, the no-look inside pass, and he's like, "Oh, that's what you call it. Okay, cool. We have a name now."
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that was, that era. And it's like, we're old now, I guess, when we're saying that era. But there were some really exciting innovations that came through, especially from the Southern Hemisphere teams. It's not just Crusaders. South Africa was working on stuff in Australia as well. And when you started seeing it up here, certainly.
Well, I think this wasn't this also the time that we had the ETFs, all those kind of. They tried to put probably about 3 years before this when they put the ETFs in, where like things like you were allowed to sack a maul, and there were all sorts of innovations they were trying to bring in to improve the kind of the spectacle, of the game that thankfully got thrown out. But yeah, so virtually he had come on at this point for Ellis.
The experimental law variations, the ELVs, I think were coming out in 2008. Was it 2008?
Yeah, so clearly, and that was all Southern Hemisphere driven. So it clearly, you say the Southern Hemisphere teams were trying to really step up the game at this point during this period. So first Leahy inside ball to Guildford, who gives it to Maitland for the last try on 68 minutes, 44-28. So we're talking about a 16-point lead in this game, and only one try more by the Crusaders than the Sharks. Yeah. So this game was, the Crusaders were always comfortably in the lead. The reason was, unfortunately, the Sharks just couldn't kick sticks in this game. Otherwise, it would have been much closer.
Also, if I can just point out, and this is a lot of credit to Rassie Erasmus, is you saw in that game, especially up until the point where they were really chasing it, is they were reverting to the South African type of running into contact rather running into space. And Willem Alberts is the archetypal South African player who, in fact, his nickname through his rugby career was the Bone Collector, right?
It's rather sinister.
Yeah. And I've heard a live interview panel discussion with JP Peterson, who played with him at the Sharks and the Springboks, and they said, they were asking questions like, who would you not like to tackle, and who would whatever. And he said, I just am very glad that I played with Willem Alberts, because I used to run behind him when he carried the ball. As a winger, he would often run that support line for him as he trucked it up. And he said, and I used to hear the sound that he made, the sound when he made contact. And he said it wasn't a very pleasant sound, right?
Well, yes. And Albert Smith, say the opening try for the Sharks, took 3 players with him as he scored that opening try. Yeah, he was a powerful runner.
Yes, and he took a beating on his body, but the Sharks played into contact, right? Which is the New Zealanders play into space, and that's the great change that we've seen, especially in the back line in the last sort of 18 months under Rassie Erasmus, and then into the World Cup. So there was a skill difference as well in the way that the All Blacks utilize space. Sorry, Mikey, I interrupted you. You were going to say something?
No. I was. I think at some points you have to use your big players to your advantage if that's what you have in your toolkit. You still see that happening with a lot of teams out there. Although I do like the idea of running into space. I'm back. I like continuity. I like the game always moving and going forward. But if you got a big guy who's going to take 3 people with him, if you can get a quick recycle ball off of that, then suddenly it's 14 against 12. I mean, that makes a huge difference. Would it be nice if that big guy ran an extra 5 meters? Probably.
But the big thing for me when I've tried to explain this to people, and it's not so much a relevant example at the moment because they're not so much in rugby anymore. For me, the incredible comparison was Mialamu versus Bismarck du Plessis. Kevin Mialamu and Bismarck du Plessis. So I have a huge regard for Mialamu as a player and as a leader. But he was nowhere near the physical specimen that Bismarck du Plessis was.
Right, yeah.
But very few rugby players are physically as gifted as Bismarck du Plessis was. But Kevin Mialamu had an incredible career, and right at the end of his career, he had this ability to shift the point of contact in those close quarters where he played as a hooker. He always was shifting his hips, stepping, pivoting, moving, and so you never lined him up shoulder to shoulder because he was always just doing this and just moving, just stepping, just changing before the point of contact where you hit him. And as a result, he was always, if not beating the first tackler, he was at least getting his arms past the point of the tackle, right? So as a coach, Mikey will tell you, what you want your players to do is to be able to, even if they can't pass the ball, so he had the ability to pass the ball, but even if there is no pass to be made, when you go to ground, you want your arms free so that you can place, right, Mikey? So you can place the ball out there. So as a result, because he was always getting his torso free, he wasn't just simply tucking the ball under an arm and then dropping a shoulder and going in like this and being wrapped up. Because he was always shifting, he was always in such a good position to beautifully place the ball.
Yeah. You probably call it the same. I would call it ABC, agility before contact, but I think it's a really good point you make is still being able to get that upper body free from that point of contact so you can actually either make a proper placement or look for that offload or pop up, something along those lines. So,
that's right.
Yeah, it's really like Mialamu, great footwork before he gets to the contact. Sonny Bill Williams, same thing. He's always making take the point of contact away from what he wants to do with the ball.
That's it. Now imagine if Bismarck du Plessis from young had been taught the same way, and imagine if he shifted the point of contact instead of just simply dropping the shoulder and I'm going to barge right over you. Instead, he stepped and ran at your arm instead of your shoulder.
We have this conversation here in Canada all the time, and it's so oddly enough, when you're a big, strong, gifted player, you do what you do best, which is run things and try and knock them over. A lot of really good coaches here, technically quite good, but as players, they were always that guy who took that ball, trying to go an extra 10 meters, which we know that usually results in a slow ball or a turnover ball sort of aspect. So I would look at the small guys and say, how do you approach the game? Mialamu was a smaller guy in the international scale, but but probably a lot smarter because he wasn't that big, or wasn't as big as his opposition.
Yeah, I mean, a player who made the most of his abilities. Bringing it back to the 2011 season, though,
We're geeks.
the Crusaders finished the season 11 wins, 1 draw, and 4 losses to finish top of the New Zealand Conference and 3rd overall, and 3rd seed. The Sharks, though, also 10 wins, 1 draw, 5 losses, so only 4 points behind the Crusaders overall on the table. So I mean, look, these were 2 of the top sides in the competition that year. The Sharks went on to visit and play the Crusaders in that quarterfinal game, and which was held in Trafalgar Park in Nelson. That finished 36-8. So the Crusaders went through there. They then travelled over to South Africa to beat the Stormers 10-29 before meeting the Reds in the final. That final game is another game that we will have on the Retro Rugby Show. Myself and John will be joined by Shane, who's a Reds fan. Obviously, he has very pleasant memories of that game.
Really? He's a Reds fan?
Gosh.
So we'll
Johnny, hey.
There isn't quite as many incidents or scoring in that game as there is in this one, so it probably won't take quite the full hour to go through the whole game. But yes, don't forget to join myself and John and Shane to talk about the 2011 Super Rugby final. So yeah, following on from this game, and there are plenty of other games also lined up for me to talk through. So please don't forget to support the channel, and I'm still trying to decide whether this is going to be a supporter only or actually on YouTube. We'll see. But thank you everyone for watching. Thank you so much, John, for joining me and for suggesting this game.
Hey, John, pleasure.
Great to meet you, Mikey. Great to chat with you. Great to have a coach. Great to be able to talk to somebody who really knows a bit about rugby.
Mikey, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us again, and for saying and for your memories from this game, and the fact that you still coach some of the moves in this game. I've been trying to get you on the show for a couple of years now, and eventually I've got you on camera, which is good. So thank you for joining me as well.
Paul, can the viewers drop you, email you, or contact you, or post and about some ideas that maybe they might have, because we might be in this phase for quite some time of no sport generally, right?
So comments down below any games that you would like us to review, definitely, and if there's any other things you would like to hear from us about on rugby, then do let us know. The Hash Rugby Chat will still be going live at 8 p.m. every Tuesday, and as John has suggested, we will also include in there some recommendations on box sets to watch as well, because we know that it's not just rugby. You need a break from rugby at times. Some TV shows are also worth doing. So so definitely join us live 8 p.m. every Tuesday for Hash Rugby Chat, where we will be talking about rugby and also giving you our best TV tips as well. So thank you, everybody, and catch you all next time.